So,
Yeah.
hello Hugh.
Hi, Nathan, how you doing?
So, can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Yeah. What about myself? I'm a social worker. I'm sort of late 30s. I'm work in the disability sector and a job that I do enjoy, for the overwhelming majority of the time. I suppose if I was to talk about the roles in my life, I'm a father. I'm a cabinet maker, I suppose. I'd like to think of myself that at times, and just sort of at that stage of life where it's sort of head down, bum up, doing between the kids and work and all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
Filling those roles.
filling those roles. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. And can you tell me what's important to you in your life?
I've been thinking about this because I expected that was one of the first questions you'd be asking. I think for me, right here, right now, I think on one level, what's important to me is I suppose like the happiness and the safety and security of my family is very important to me. I think having a sense that my contributions are meaningful and helping the world be better off than when I came in, I suppose that is something that's really important to me. I think just that sort of having a general feeling that to really some degree my life is contributing to a greater whole, I suppose, that I'm sort of, I think that's important to me. But also I think it's important to me that my contributions are valued as well. Not that I'm purely doing stuff for other people's gratification, it's not about that, but it's certainly, I just don't want to think that I'm sort of, if I'm putting the effort into trying to make the world, if I'm trying to make the most of the skills and contributions that I have, that I'm doing it in a way that A, is effective and useful, but is also, actually is meaningful, I suppose, rather than just a bunch of random attempts at, trying to do the right thing or trying to make sense of the world or trying to be effective in whatever way, I suppose. But I think also what's important to me, it's almost like I think there's like a positive and a negative side to that question, as in not good and bad, but more like on the positive side of the things I want in my life. But there's also the stuff I don't want in my life. Like what's important to me is that I don't have, poverty and violence, and and I suppose that and fear, I suppose, like they're things that I don't want, and they're things I don't want in my life, and by extension my family's life, and I don't want sort of hopelessness and ineffectiveness, I suppose, is another big thing. I do see there's a lot of things wrong with the world that almost seem, if it's not one thing, it'll be something else. There's an inevitability to sort of chaos and entropy and those sorts of things, but it's that however they're being addressed is done in an effective way, and I think that's important to me, that I'm learning and getting better at those things, but also that my actions, the collective that any collectives, whether that be a PNC or a school fate committee or a group of friends or whatever, particularly any collective that's trying to do something to make the world, change the world or make it better or contribute, that it's doing so in an effective way, I don't want to think that I'm sort of joining the next, pretty silly example, but joining the next Nazi party or joining the next sort of something that will be causing harm, or something that will, even like a charity that ends up actually not really being well thought out and causing harm on the back of it, So I suppose they're, for me, like that's sort of, they're the things that are important to me, that I'm sort of growing and learning and developing
you say that's like using your power for good, to use Pat's language?
Yeah, using my power for good, but learning as well. That I'm learning as I go.
Yeah. So you're creating something great for other people, and you're also getting something as well.
Yeah.
Mutual.
I think
growth.
so. Mutual growth. Yeah, I think so. But also, and sort of deeper understanding. I think. I think a lot of the. I do think a lot of the ill will in the world is through sort of ignorance, whether it be deliberate ignorance, which I think is can be quite a common thing, but also people deliberately sort of not wanting to think too hard about things or whatever. But I think also just obviously my own sort of overcoming my own sort of fallibilities or my own sort of misunderstandings or ignorance about things or false beliefs and those sorts of things as well. So. Yeah.
What about the cabinet making? Is that would you call that like an art of yours, an expression of yourself?
It is definitely, but I also think it's that it's something for me. I don't have to. It's something that where I can apply myself in a way that isn't necessarily for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't tend to keep the things I make. I do tend to give them away, but it's almost that's the object once it's done. It's the process of doing things that I'm more interested in. Similarly, like if I help people with gardening and those sorts of things, it's almost like the act of it is what I'm more interested in rather than the outcome. It's nice to see the outcome, and it's nice to sort of think that the outcome will sort of you plant a tree and it can potentially outlive you, and I like that sort of stuff. But it's also just that intentionality.
Yeah.
But it's also for me, it's just like the physicality of it too. Like I spend so much time sitting on my backside of work. I've got an office job and sit down all day, so it's nice to have. Use other parts of me, I suppose, challenge myself in other ways. But that's also identity as well. Like I think if I was at work, we talk about valued social roles, and for me, it's a very much a valued social role that I have as a cabinet maker. I'm not a particularly good cabinet maker. I'm still learning with that and all that sort of thing. But it's those other identity things that come around. Owning steel cap boots and having a nice drill that I know how to use effectively, and having a drop saw, and having those sorts of things, but also having books on cabinetry and hanging out with other cabinet makers, and having when I look at Instagram, it's full of spoon carving and cabinet making and that sort of stuff. It's sort of that it's that sort of identity as well. I think as well as the I like the identity it gives me, as well as the skills and thing.
Is it a belonging? Like a social group to join?
Yeah, I think so. To a degree, like it certainly was when I had my teacher, when my teacher was up here. That was definitely a community that he'd created with myself and another person I was doing the classes with, and that was really important to me at the time, especially with having a young family and that sort of single track of life that I find I think people tend to get into perfectly natural and normal. I think I'm not saying it's a wrong and bad thing, but just having you're either at work or you're home for family and don't get much time to yourself, and that was certainly an experience that's where I was at. So it was great for me to be able to take most Sundays out to go out and learn some new skills and cut big bits of wood into little bits of wood and, and turn it into something. I think that was
nice.
Mm.
You talked about your family. So what is that, like you said, safety and security, and what does that look like? What is when you describe your the relationships around your family? What does that look like? So things are important to you there.
I think it's important for me as my kids develop, as they grow older, I suppose is that they have some degree of self-awareness and humility, but also that have an understanding of the humanity of their parents, that we're both just sort of just two mugs trying to make sense of the world. That we're not necessarily, we're not perfect, and that, but it's just that generally that I think that sort of just the quest for learning, the yearning for learning, that they are. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to. It's important you do, and it's all that sort of thing. But it's rather than sort of taking things personally or trying to seeing it as a character failing, I suppose, that it's okay to sort of try and work out what the learning is with that. I think that's sort of, and whether that be certainly for they're young, so for them a lot of it's about self-control and trying to learn not to punch your 1-year-old cousin because he touched your spoon or whatever, like all those things, but that it's that sort of, and stuff that's developmentally appropriate, obviously, because I know like Pat's frontal cortex is a long way to go before he's able to sort of have that sort of control over his impulses and things, but it is that thing of just every step of the way, I suppose, that sort of that as they develop, they can have that sort of they can learn and grow, and that as our relationship develops as well, that we can sort of learn and grow as we get older and share and share things, I think. But that I think it is that sort of I just think that's important. Like, I think it's almost inevitable that, like, I know, especially when they're teenagers, they'll want to push away and carve their own path and do all that sort of stuff, and that's important they do that then. And I'm sure before, like, it's already happening, but I think that it's done with a degree of sort of I don't know, doing it with a, I suppose, just self-awareness and being kind to themselves and kind to others, I suppose, as much as you can. Yeah, and that's, but yeah, I think that's important. But also in a way, like, it sort of isn't, certainly for me as a father and a partner or what have you, that there's just that sort of, they've got decent food to eat and that they can, food to eat and shelter and basic needs met and those sorts of things too are really important. I think, like that's important. But also like hospitality and stuff too, like community is important. And I think that's one of the reasons for me, certainly at school, trying to be active at school and trying to get the kids out and get them sort of involved in that as well, is trying to give them a bit of an appreciation of the importance of contribution. That if you want the world to be better, it's you can't wait for someone else to do that. Like, it's something you need to do.
Yeah. You're one of the most well-known, well-connected people I know. Like, you seem to know everyone. I can know you for a long time, and I run into people that I've never met before, and they know who you are.
Yeah.
Would you say that, like, connecting with people is like connecting with lots of people in the community is important to you?
It is, definitely. Yeah. Definitely it is. And I just like that. I like to sort of stop and have a chat and a yarn. And it's a bit ironic. There's a great irony there for me. It's absolutely terrible at remembering people's faces and their names. I'm just chronically just terrible at it. So it's a thing where often sort of so I think there is that irony there where that's people do tend to. I think people do. I know I do have quite broad networks, and it's something I do value. But I do it not knowing half of their names and not being able to, put faces to the names. But I think, I do. Even that in itself is something. I think that's something that I know it's something I'm good at and something I do enjoy. So, But just trying to make sort of, I do try to use that. I do try to leverage that a bit. Like, I like connecting people. I like it when I find two people that I think might have a shared interest, and they hit it off, and then work out something together. Whether it be a business or whether it just be someone who. This guy I can think of with it, like he's just completely sick for cricket, adores cricket, and is the sort of person who, for various reasons, would normally have a bit of trouble getting involved in a cricket club. But I just happen to know randomly this guy in Scotland who just happens to be the president of a cricket club that happens to be, the suburb across from where this guy lives, and it's just like it's really cool to be able to like connect them up, and then. The guy from Scotland was, he's a really, really nice guy, really genuine guy, and sort of made the time to welcome this guy and made the time to sort of make sure he was introduced well, and that this guy's got a disability and there's things there that are sort of are barriers. But he was sort of just, he's now this guy's coming up for a second season, and his role in the club's building, and it's just really, I don't know. That sort of stuff. It's sort of, all I did was make an introduction, but it's sort of, that's I think where I like it when that sort of stuff sort of pays off. I think, yeah.
A contribution.
Contribution, definitely. Yeah, contribution.
Do you ask this question or this sort of question to people often? Is this a sort of conversation? Do you have these sorts of conversations with people in your life often?
Daddy, son is in there and he looks like X-Men.
It looks like an X-Men, does he?
Yeah.
Cool.
From he was near Iron Man and Darcy and
Cool. I look forward to seeing that, mate. How about you go sit? You go sit there. Yeah, you go sit over there, and I'll show you in a bit. Thanks, mate.
Yeah. I'll put the headphones back on for you. Oh, hang on. This is caught.
Yeah. So what was the question?
Do you ask? This
Oh,
sort
we'll
of
ask that
conversation?
question.
Do you find yourself asking this sort of question to people?
Look, to be honest, I think I do permutations of this question, but it's sort of like for me, like one of the central. Like I'm a social worker, so there's an element to which. Yes, Pat.
You said when we get from Arthur Harry Roddy's haircut shop, we can
I know what you're asking for, mate. An ice cream?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We'll get an ice cream after this. Hey, we'll get an ice cream on the way home. I promise. Yeah. But look, I do like it sort of tends to be in more of that capacity. It's a professional capacity, though. Like a large part of the work that I do is around, like whether it be working from a strength-based perspective or using a sort of a almost like a social role valorization sort of humanistic sort of approach of sort of what's a good life look like for you. You know, like that's a very they're common questions, but there's an element of Pat, it's 5 minutes, hey? I just need you 5 minutes on that, hey? Pat, actually, I know what you'll like to do. So you got a bit of editing ahead of you, Nathan. But
You never know, it might just go raw.
well, I might do. Melanie did ask her that Pat's not. She asked that Pat's on it, but that's fine. Yeah. No. So, but yeah. So I'm trying to sort of backtrack things a segue, but yeah, Pat, you don't need these headphones anymore, mate. Because you don't need that for that game. I think, yeah, it's in the professional capacity. It's sort of, I think if you're working with people, particularly people that have an intellectual impairment, where their self-agentry is there, but they need some support for it to be to sort of be active in it, I suppose. Or no, that's a bit wrong to say. Everyone's got self-agentry, but it's like to a degree. But to really sort of help people construct a life of meaning and purpose and value for themselves, that it is that sort of fishing trip, I suppose, of what's important to them and how to. So whilst the question explicitly, what is important to you in your life, we wouldn't ask that question because it'd just be, you know, it's very abstract, and it's like it's difficult to answer because once again it changes, like different stages of your life and all those sorts of things. You know, like a 16-year-old boy would probably have a very different question to a 60-year-old man, maybe. Who knows? But depending on the person, obviously. But I think, you know, generally speaking, that'd be the case. And I think, yeah. So in that context, yes. But even in the, once again, broadening the context out, say the, you know, disability sector, I think it's extremely rare that people would think to ask that question. I think we're pretty unique in that way. People would make a lot of assumptions about what the answer to that question was for those people. You know, they wouldn't think, you know, what's important to you in your life, and say what's important to a 38-year-old man with a disability. And that's a very different question to what's important to a 38-year-old man, or what's important to me. You know, it's like it's sort of it can be quite sort of dehumanised, I suppose. So yeah, I don't know if that's quite answered the question, but I think it's not a common question. I wouldn't say it's a common question at all, and it's.
Why do you think so? I mean, I would argue that it's the most important question of every human being. It's the thing the biggest thing that differentiates us.
Yeah, I think, why do we not ask those sorts of questions?
Now, why do you not ask that sort of question?
Okay, why do I not ask that sort of question to people? I think because there's only a small number of people where I'd feel comfortable asking that question. I think there's an element to which, to me, to make it sort of deeply personal, I'm always a little bit worried about if someone unpacks, but by getting too deep into something that I'd be asking questions that I wouldn't know how to handle the answer of. And that's something that's definitely which is not maybe not the greatest thing as a social worker, I suppose, because invariably you are talking to people about stuff that is so, you can, asking some very personal things. So I think that is an inherent challenge there, I suppose. But I think, I just think certainly for me, a lot of the relationships I have are, whether they be a transactional relationship at a shop or just to get things done, even to some, not that I think that my work relationships are transactional to the same degree, but there's an element of you just want to get things done. But also I think even that, like to ask a question like this, it's a bit of a, time out of reality, time out, we're just going to forget about all the other stuff you've got going on, forget about the bills that need to be paid, or what time you're going to pick the kid up from school, what jobs you have left to be done at home, or remembering the name of that person that you're seeing tomorrow, or whatever the thing is that is there. It's almost like to ask a question like this, it is a real sort of the break from just normal existence, I suppose, to ask that. And it's not something that I think it's that, yeah. But I am. It's certainly something I'm interested in. It is something I'm interested in, and I pause because I just think about I do enjoy sort of those more philosophical conversations with people, and I do tend to have them about what's important for people more broadly, or that sort of what's the meaning of life type questions. But I suppose specifically with this question, it does sort of pull it out of the abstract into the individual, even though I think it is an abstract question fundamentally, but it's a very personal, it's an abstract question about the personal, which is not, in some ways it's easier to talk about sort of the meaning of existence in, as a meta thing, I suppose, rather than what's important to you in your life type question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or when you ask the question, it's about someone who's worried about their work, or worried about their relationship, or worried about a specific thing in their life, where it's like, well, how would you like it to be different or better, or how would you like it to change? It's that question rather than that sort of stop and reflect type question more broadly.
Yeah. Why does it occur as abstract? Like, it occurs to me as how I would define myself in comparison to what would I want to create? What do I want to make? What do I want the meaning of life to me would be my answer to this question. Why does it occur to you as abstract?
Well, I think it is fundamentally abstract. It's like, because it's sort of, there's an element to which it is sort of, it's not like you're talking about a concrete thing about sort of how long's that piece of timber, or what's the name of that plant over there, or it is. I think it's a bit more sort of ethereal in nature, and the fact that it does change, and it does have. It's just not a concrete thing, It's sort of. I think it does and it's not an absolute thing either. I think it does change, and it does. Even as changes with mood. If you're feeling optimistic or pessimistic, or if you're feeling, you were asking me this question a week ago when worried about, getting a bit fixated on global warming in the future of the world. That my kids will, that I'll live in, but I'm probably more worried about that my kids inheriting. or growing up in, then in that context, that's then it becomes a very different question, I think. I think the question does depend a lot on, if we were having this conversation with someone who was, if I was diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, my answer would be very different. If I won the lotto tomorrow, or if I was someone who was in extreme poverty, or they're all it's almost like that, maybe a little bit of that, almost like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of thing. Like there's certain needs that need to be met. If I was, so I think a lot of it, and that's what I mean sort of by it's abstract, is it does, I think the answer that I'll have to that question would very much depend on my frame of mind and the context of the world that I was in, and my internal context, what the experiences that had sort of led me to the moment that I was in now, I suppose.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the points of it, which is that it's what's important to you in your life. Life changes. It's different tomorrow, it's different today, different next month, different next week.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the beauties of it is that it applies. I've yet to find a situation where it doesn't apply in my life. It's sort of one of the beauties of it is that I can reframe where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think it's a great chance to, as I said, that time out, that sort of stop and just take stock of things and go like, well, what is actually, because it's so, what is actually important to me right here, right now, because it is so easy to get caught up on that windmill of that mouse wheel of life, and sort of just do things because that's what's comfortable, or that's what's the least scary, or the least sort of or the least likely to sort of agitate or create change that you'll have to deal with. I think they're things that are I think they're the sort of things that something happened, hey? Yeah.
Let me have a look. Oh, got the little. There we go, mate.
Yeah. So I sort of lost my train of thought there, but yeah.
It's an interesting question. That's why I really find it an enjoyable one to ask from people, and see the difference in answers over time.
Yeah, definitely.
See what comes up today, and it's like one of my friends sort of says it's like a Britney Spears song that never ends. He's in the car, and whereas previously he might have gotten annoyed that the person in front was driving slowly. He's thinking about this question, like, what am I going to create today?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? Reframing, and noticing things that maybe he was doing that previously that doesn't need to do anymore. It's sort of like an opportunity to create whatever you want to create in the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
You ask yourself that question, and you can completely change what's important to you.
See, and that is something I think is sort of I think it's a very interesting statement to make, though, because it's like, just in terms of change, be able to change yourself. Like, I think for some people, and some like for some people they can, and for some people I think change does happen. Some people are lucky where it is that sort of snap of the fingers and something big happens, and like, I'm not going to smoke cigarettes anymore, or I'm not going to I'm not going to say that about myself anymore, or whatever the thing is that is sort of I'm not going to worry about that person anymore, or whatever that thing is. But I do think a lot of that, I think whilst there are those changes, those sort of almost spontaneous moments of change, I think the majority of change is a very slow process. And rightly so. Like, because it's I think it's quite very rare to have that clarity of thought where you can say unequivocally, this is the right change to be making. So much of it's a fishing trip, and once again, rightly so. It was like, when I think, using almost maybe say it's a bit of a metaphor, like the design process before building a cabinet. You don't want to just run in and build a table because you think this is this, on that impulse and go like, bang, this is the change I'm going to make, and I'm going to build this thing right here now. You want to go through a bit of a design process before it, making mistakes and being able to rub things out and being able to sort of toy with an idea. Should the chair have 3 legs or 6? Like whatever. What sort of, have a bit of a play with that before you realise that. And invariably with that too, you might just realise, well, I'll put in 4 chairs because that's what makes sense, and that's why people build chairs that have 4 legs in the same way that sort of like, before making some radical change, to sort of stop and think, well, maybe there's a reason why people do things that way in the first place, or you might say, actually, no, I am going to do something different and pioneer a new way of doing things, and that's whether it be new for you or new for humanity at large, I suppose. But but I think, I do. I think it's I think slow change is not a bad thing either. I think people can get. I think people do like it. I think people value that whether it be quick thinking or that quick change process. I think it's attractive. It'd be nice. You buy a lotto ticket and you go from being broke to being a millionaire overnight. It's like, great, wonderful. That's. But once again, even with the extending that example, I suppose it's like, I think things tend to be better when you've earned them. And you might, and once again with that, the person who decides to quit cigarettes or stop thinking about that person or whatever, that aha moment might come after, and I would say almost always would come after days, months, weeks, years of contemplating and thinking, am I doing the right thing? And, like that sort of testing out different ideas, drawing that line and scrubbing it out again and drawing it again, that sort of thinking about meditating on, is this the right thing to be doing or not, and is there a better way of doing it, and what's stopping me from doing it, or what's stopping me from embracing it, or whatever the thing is that's needed, So,
So what context do you think people live from if they're not living from the answer to this question?
Now, what's important to you in your life?
So how are people living their lives if they're not living them from the answer to this question?
Well, starters, I would say this is a very Western question. This is a very I think the whole thing of what is important to you in your life, I think for a lot of cultures, even a lot of people with different backgrounds, it might be that it's really not about me, it's about the greater whole. And so I suppose in that sense, what's important to I suppose you could say that is an answer to that same question. But I think for a lot of, I think it would be, the question would be coming from a different perspective about sort of what's important to the greater community here, or what's important to what's important to my family, or what's important to my, and seeing those things as being the more important question than what's important to me in my life. In the same, I think different, and even that I find it hard to imagine that stuff, because I am of the culture that I'm of, and that I do spend so much time thinking about myself and the world and my place in the world, and that I find it hard to sort of. But I suppose from what I gather, and this might be a false, might be a false statement completely, but from what I gather, I suppose different people from different cultures do look at those things differently. I would be interested, actually, that is an area, if I was to ever do a PhD, that would be something I'd be interested in, actually, like that sort of thing, to see if that need to test some of those, have a chance to stop and test some of those things and go like, are we really all that different, I suppose, across those things?
Videos, can't you?
Well, that'd be one way to do it, yeah.
We have done interviews across 7 different cultures.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, that would be interested, I'd be interested to hear that. Yeah. Oh well, I'll check them out.
But you didn't answer the question. What context do you think people are living from if they're not living from this answer?
I think they're could be living in a context of. So once again, I don't think there's a single answer to the question. I think it could be.
It doesn't have to be intellectual. It's just more that what occurs to me. Maybe I'll reframe the question. What occurs to me is that if we're not living from the context of our answer to this question, then are we living within the context of what other people think, you know, the keeping up with the Joneses, the media, society in general, our friends, you know, our friends, our family. And is that fulfilling? You know, that's, for me, the reason I started asking this question to myself and others was, you know, how much of the stuff that you do is for you, and how much, is there any stuff in there that you do it and you're not okay with doing it, you know, because it's just part of, you know, your experience of TV, you know, part of your experience of your childhood.
Yeah, you do it without consciousness. You're not sort of actually conscious of your actions, or you haven't questioned them and you haven't stopped them. There's a really great, and it's one of my favourite lines of a song, and it does have a depressive edge to it, but it's by Nick, it's not like Nick Cave, but it's like, anyway, Nick Drake, sorry, but it's life is but a memory happened long ago, a theatre full of sadness for a long forgotten show. Seems so easy just to let it go on by till you stop and wondered why you've never wondered why. And I just think there's such wisdom in that line, like such truth, that it's sort of, it is so easy to just go along and put one foot after the other, and before you know it, you're 40 or 50 or you're whatever, or, you know, and I think, it's so easy to do that. I don't, but also actually, and I think about, once again, a really great bit of wisdom was given by a friend of mine, she's a friend of mine, but particularly my friend's wife, and she, her thing was that I was lamenting of the lack of reflection that I had in my life at this particular period, because I'd gone from sort of studying philosophy and religion and what have you at uni, you know, doing the old sort of Bachelor of Attendance, I suppose, and but you know, that having that and being that as a big area of study and focus. But then I had a job that was all encompassing, and I didn't really give me much sort of free consciousness to really be able to think about that stuff anymore. And I was sort of lamenting that. And her thing was, well, there's a time for doing, and there's a time for reflecting, and there's a time for doing. You know, like it's sort of, and I think that with and I suppose that's my answer to your question. I think it's sort of. Sometimes you just have to give stuff a go, I suppose, and I think some people just haven't. I do think some people just in that bubble where they just haven't really stopped to think about things, and they haven't been taught to, or they haven't been encouraged to, they haven't had an opportunity to. They just sort of just do because they do, or you know, because that's just the way it's based. You know, they're existing because they exist almost, and they haven't stopped and reflected on that stuff. But I also think there's, like, you know, going back to the metaphor of design and versus building. There's an element of which, when you design, you are stopping and thinking, and you know, is this, where it is that sort of what is important to you in your life type moment, where you are sort of really stopping and reflecting on that. But then you do have to act and see how you've answered that question is actually true, and I think that's. I think that's another. I think it's another element to that question, is sort of what's important to you in your life. I could say, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, or I could say whatever. I could give any answer to that question, but it's only by doing that stuff that I would actually get any. I would know. You know, it's only in the doing that I would know whether or not that was the right answer. I think. But as you get older, I think it's also then that I think you get better at answering what that is and what it isn't too. Like, I know I can safely say, you know, not that I've ever been a rock star, but not that I've ever been a sort of sex god or massively on the drugs or anything either. But it's still, like, I could safely say that's probably not something I would be interested in, so I don't pursue it. But you know, I think as I get older, I think I get a bit clearer about what is important to me, and it is that sort of through that trial and error. So, but I think, you know, so I think there are some people who just haven't stopped and thought about that stuff for various reasons, whether that be something, you know, whether that just be because of they just weren't, you know, whether it be through education or family culture or whatever, or whether it be through extreme trauma, you know, or not even extreme trauma, just trauma in general, or whether that be you know, poverty and any number of things like that as well. I think that could get in the way of people being able to answer that question with clarity. But at the same time, no, not to say that those experiences negate people from having the capacity or the opportunity to answer those questions either. I certainly wouldn't want to sell people short by that, but. Yeah, I think it's sort of, it's a great luxury to be able to take the time, I think. I know it is a great luxury to be able to stop and sort of, take the time out of life to be able to, stop and ask that question. The fact that I have that I can take a day off each fortnight to be able to spend a day with my son, and that frees me up to be able to do stuff like that. Like if we were to talk to a, like single mum with 6 kids, or single mum with 1 kid, 2 kids, single parent, single father for that matter, with no job or struggle, low income and all that sort of stuff. It'd be to actually even find the time to stop and have a conversation like this would be a great luxury, I suppose, and a great improbability as well. So.
Yeah.
Great improbability. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no worries, Nathan. No, I really enjoyed that. So, yeah, thank you.